everybody, and welcome to this 16th episode of our podcast Blood Matters, a podcast for nurses. In today's episode, we are diving into the fascinating world of gene therapy. That's a revolutionary approach that's transforming how we treat diseases. Gene therapy aims to cure illnesses by modifying DNA, but what is it exactly and how does it work? And how is this experienced by patients, and what challenges do nurses face? We will talk about these questions about today with two wonderful guests, Jinhua Xu-Bayford, and I hope I pronounce it good, and Kelly Hennessey, both with their own experiences in gene therapy. Jinhua more in the care for patients with a primary immune deficiency, and Kelly with her experiences with patients with hemoglobinopathies. And I will first introduce Jinhua a bit more. Jinhua is the lead clinical nurse specialist for the gene therapy and immunology team at the Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, a role partially funded by the NIHR Biomedical Research Center, and she completed her initial studies at the School of Public Health, the Chinese Academy of Medical Science, and Beijing Medical University, followed by specialist training in pediatric nursing at Gorsch. And since joining Gorsch in 2001, she has been deeply involved in the hospital's pioneering gene therapy program from its inception, including the care of every stem cell gene therapy patient treated at Gorsch. Michelle, do you like to introduce Kelly a little bit?
Yeah, thanks very much, Hilda, and hi everyone. Welcome to the 16th episode. So Kelly works as a gene therapy research coordinator and bone marrow failure nurse specialist at St Mary's Hospital in London, and she's primarily involved in managing the care of paediatric patients with bone marrow failure syndromes such as Diamond-Blackfan anemia, Fanconi anemia, and plastic anemia. And she's also the lead research nurse for the exa-cel gene therapy trial for patients with thalassemia and sickle cell disease, which makes her something of an expert in this area. She's got 10 years experience working with patients having transplants for non-malignant disease, and she's also lead research nurse for various other studies, including cellular products and other studies relating to bone marrow failure syndromes, hemoglobinopathies. She also works as part of the apheresis service, performing red cell exchanges, therapeutic plasma exchange, and continuous mononuclear cell collection. So she has lots of patient contact within her role. So she's not only is she relevant to a research arena, but also clinically. And she's also the nurse representative of the Severe Aplastic Anemia Working Party of the EBMT and paediatric representative of the UK EBMT NAP group. So welcome to our guests.
Welcome to our guests. We have two wonderful guests, Jinhua and Kelly, and I will start with Jinhua. Welcome, Jinhua. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Thank you. Yes, I will. Yeah. I'm the lead gene therapy and immunology clinical nurse specialist. So that's kind of the brief title. And so I am actually have two hats mainly as well. So I'm clinical nurse specialist. And also at the same time, I'm a research nurse too, because all my patients are pretty much on research gene therapy trials. And so my two key patients cohort is patients who are needing definitive treatment, either bone marrow transplant or gene therapy. So my day-to-day, so I'm in a quite a unique position. So day-to-day, I plan all patients' care, manage all their, and also manage their care as well, and a coordinator, just everything. So I kind of participate in every step, actually, of their journey. So that gave me quite good insight how, from patients' perspective as well as from health professionals, I think.
Thanks so much, and Joanne, lovely to have you here with all those experiences. Michelle, can you ask the next question?
Yeah, hi Jinhua. So gene therapy, you've talked a bit about your role. It's a rapidly evolving field. You know, you say you're involved with quite a lot of clinical trials. Can you talk us briefly through the main principles of gene therapy and how it actually works?
Sure. So gene therapy is a technique that modifies person's genes to treat, patient's disease or cure. So it can work in several different ways, such as replacing a disease-causing gene with a healthy copy of the gene, or inactivating a disease-causing gene that is not functioning properly. Or introduce a new modified gene into patient's body to help to treat a disease. And it is really, well, ideally, it would be one-time treatment, one-time therapy. And there are a number of different ways of gene therapy, but it can be broken down as generally what I say in vivo or ex vivo approaches. So in vivo, by its name, is it means where the gene therapy is delivered systemically into a patient's bloodstream or to a specific organ. One of the examples for this that I think, even though it's not my specialty, but I know about it for SMA and spinal muscular atrophy, the treatment for is licensed for that already. Zolgensma, I think that's called the fancy name, or ex vivo gene therapy, where we have to remove patients' cells from patients, and we correct the patient's cells in the laboratory, and then return the cells to patients. So in all cases, we usually modify patient cells using a virus that carries the working copy gene. And so we use the virus to carry the working copy gene into patient's cells. So examples of this, perhaps lots of audience would listen to this podcast, would say like CAR T cell therapy or stem cell gene therapy, which is really is my areas of expertise. And we use the ex vivo gene therapy to treat using ex vivo gene therapy to correct patients' stem cells for a range of inborn error immunities and metabolic and hematological conditions as well. So in simplest way I can say, so we're taking patients' stem cells, usually through mobilized apheresis, and we select patients' cells, select the CD34 cells, and then the cells will be transported into gene therapy lab, where the therapeutic gene would be mixed with the patient's cells, and then we freeze the cells down and then perform all the quality checks, so to make sure the product is good, and that it can be released. The product can be released to patients, and then we admit patients, and the cells will be re-infused back to patients after some sort of either myeloreductive or myeloablative chemoconditioning. And then, just like the BMT, then we'll wait for a period of time for the cells to recover, to regenerate.
Wow, thanks very much, Jinhua. I mean, there are many sort of little areas where it's very similar. It's very familiar to HCT, but clearly there's a massive amount of technology infiltrated within that as well. I'm just going to hand over to Hilda now for the next question.
Thank you. You are highly involved in many clinical trials, as you already said, regarding gene therapy for patients with immunodeficiency. Can you tell us a bit more about important considerations like the harms and benefits regarding the decision for gene therapy for this group of patients?
Well, for this audience, I guess the main benefits we probably would talk is in comparison to transplant, HSCT. And so the key benefits here is gene therapy of the use is autologous, so it's own cells. So the one key difference is there's no GvHD, no graft versus host disease, because we modify patients' own cells. And so we don't need to use the immunosuppressant. and the even for the chemotherapy conditioning is a reduced intensity. For SCID patients, perhaps if you're familiar with the busulfan, what is it? One single agent we use, busulfan, and our busulfan target, Hilda, you might know, or Michelle, just AUC for our SCID, 2 types of SCID we're doing. AUC is 20 to 30, but for any other transplant, it's a minimum would be 45 to 60. So and for other non-SCID patients, the chemo conditioning, even though it's a myeloablative, but it's still just a single agent. So that's quite significant difference. So if you want to say harm, or I'd say, because the gene therapy obviously still is a clinical trial, limited centers can provide this, and in terms of the long-term data compared to transplant, is less. So lots of things that, we have come a long way, but we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you so much. Back to you, Michelle.
Thanks very much. So, although we've made a lot of progress, and in today, gene therapy is usually only available, though, in clinical trials. Can you explain a bit, Jinhua, where we are in translating this into routine clinical practice? When can we expect this to be commonplace, an option for patients?
An option. Because we actually made lots of notes, because this has been asked a lot. So I'm just going to, I don't want to miss anything here, just that this is a really important area, which is being discussed all around the world, actually. We do have some examples of HSC gene therapy, stem cell gene therapy becoming licensed drugs. Most recent ones, I think, the medication is called Libmeldy for MLD, and also Stremovelis for ADA SCID, which is available in Milan. We've seen amazing results from several clinical trials. I think from our centers, we published a number of publications, and the trials for immunodeficiencies. But despite all of these, due to the small number of the patients with these conditions, is not feasible for pharma or biotech companies to, don't want to upset anybody, to make this sort of licensed product to deliver them to patients. So companies that have developed these, and we've had those companies that are closing their programs for PIDs, let's say, and they are returning some of those either the program back to the institute where it was developed. So this is a challenge across the whole field. There's now new approaches being explored. And for example, at GOSH, we are now looking to see if it's possible that GOSH could take on the role of being a license holder for gene therapy that provides the therapy, just say within NHS. And also some of you may know in Italy, because they also started gene therapy some time ago. And so they developed Stremovelis, and so their programs for Stremovelis and Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome, so sort of kind of returned from the pharma company, from Orchard Therapeutics, back to them. So the Telethon Foundation is also exploring a way of how they can support licensing. So it's a huge minefield out there. Yeah. Just, we're so clinical. So lots of the things that we don't really just not aware. And the cost is a huge barrier, I'd say. But we're looking for models where we can potentially get these therapies to patients on a non-for-profit, cost-effective way. It's a challenge, but we have to take it.
Thanks so much. Gosh, it's difficult, isn't it? We are We're almost within touching distance, but it's too far still. Over to you, Hilda.
Sorry, I just remembered something when Hilda asked me the benefits and harms and a few things. I think there's a lot of because the gene therapy is still clinical trial and BMT is a standard treatment. So it is absolutely vital for us to provide information to families, and we counsel families very thoroughly. Our patients are always seen by two teams, a gene therapy team and bone marrow transplant team. And so it's kind of fortunate because I have quite good background of both sides. And at the end of the day, it's sort of down to family's choice. We just provided all the options. So when we talk about to family about gene therapy, so we need to provide up to date any trial results. Some complications occurred, so we have to update our information sheets all the time, and also informing family the timeline, when it's going to happen, and also all clinical trials that all patients need to be followed up for up to 15 years is a FDA requirement. So it's a quite commitment.
Yeah, that's really important for the decision-making process of those families. Sure, thanks a lot. Last question for you in this part. The gene therapy can be a hopeful alternative for many patients with otherwise incurable illnesses, apart from the HSCT. For which diseases is gene therapy likely to be a viable alternative to HSCT, and what do you expect for the future? You said already a little bit about it, but maybe you can delve a bit deeper.
Yes, theoretically, most genetic diseases treated with HSCT could potentially be treated with gene therapy. There are lots of preclinical studies being done, and they're quite close to, in our centers already, quite close to going to clinical trials. And so that's all, it's a very promising, and for the future, and also seeing new technologies like gene editing. So it's also coming into clinical trials. So it's a very exciting time for everybody, for the community. The key thing for us now, we because we have treated in our center, we have treated over 90 patients, 90. So it's a lot of data we are collecting, just gather all information on safety, efficacy, to take things forward. So just have to make sure how we can make the therapies, they just definitely transform patients' families' lives. And we just need to make sure how we can make them accessible to families and patients.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot for all these experiences, Jinhua. We now move on to Kelly and come back to you in the quickfire round. Kelly, happy to have you here and very welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Kelly, and I am a bone marrow transplant coordinator and lead gene therapy research coordinator at St. Mary's Hospital. So I'm part of Imperial College, and like Jinhua, I have two hats. So I'm a transplant coordinator, so I work up all of the patients who are moving forward for transplant, whether it's bone marrow failure or red cell disorders. But then I also lead on many different research. So my main passion really is gene therapy, and I'm the lead research nurse for gene therapy in our trust for hemoglobinopathies.
Thanks a lot for being here today, Kelly. Back to you, Michelle, for the next question.
So Kelly, hi. And from your vast experience of working with patients and their families having gene therapy, what have you seen as being the most important opportunities and challenges?
Thank you, Michelle. So my cohort of patients are the thalassemia and the sickle cell population. So I look after the pediatrics, and when the the trial opened for the pediatric age group, we were quite lucky that we had a lot of data which was published and was available, and we were able to share this with the families. So like Jinhua had said, when the families came to us and they were referred to us for consultations or to discuss about the option of transplantation or gene therapy and which would be better for them, we had a lot of data that we were able to share with them. And I think this is very important when you're entering into a clinical trial, because especially one that is new or has just opened, there isn't a lot of published information. There isn't other families that you can put them into touch with. So when you are giving them any information, it has to be very clear to them, and it has to be something that they're able to take away and they're able to read and to come back with you, so that you can have additional conversations with them and that you can go through all of the literature or all of the consent forms with them, because there is a lot of information there. And because sometimes when they come from poorer social economic backgrounds, the healthcare has not been something that has been readily available to these families, especially the sickle cell community. And because red cell disorders are sometimes an invisible disease, not everyone knows that they have it, and not everyone in their community knows this. So sometimes we find that is a barrier when speaking to this family and this cohort of patients. So very early along, we use our psychology team. Myself, my main job as a transplant coordinator is to support these families and to give them the advice that they might need and to present them with all of the information so that they are comfortable with their decision.
Thanks so much, Kelly. It's such an important role that you do. It really is. I'm going to hand over to Hilda.
Thanks, Kelly. Gene therapy is a complex treatment, and how can we as healthcare professionals and you as a transplant coordinator best meet families and patients' information and decisional needs?
Yeah, of course. So gene therapy is still a very novel treatment. Families will have seen it in the news, nurses will have seen it in the news, especially in September. So of course it is part of a clinical trial, but Casgevy, one of the gene editing products for hemoglobinopathies, has now been licensed and has been funded in the UK now for thalassemia patients. So I think this as well is highlighting it to everyone that it is a possibility, and especially for those patients who don't have a suitable HLA matched donor, gene editing could be the way forward. And it is your job as the nurse to advocate for these families and to educate them when it comes to gene therapy, and to highlight the difference between the standard of care, which is transplantation or transfusions, or for sickle cell patients staying on hydroxycarbamide. And then for thalassemia patients, the standard of care for them is either transplantation or else to stay on transfusions and iron chelations. So it is to see what is the best choice for these families and to present them with the information about what is best for them moving forward. At the end of the day, what we want for these families is to offer them a better quality of life, and not just for the patient, but for the family as a whole and for the wider community who is affected by the disease. So it's all about educating our younger generations of nurse and the current generation of nurses, where gene editing is something that's also new to them, so that they're able to appropriately look after their patients and the family.
Yeah, that's also definitely a very important part. Thank you so much. I'm heading back to Michelle.
Thanks. So as we've said already, gene therapy is pretty much only available through clinical trials, with a few exceptions at the moment. Can you describe your experiences of working with patients and their families participating in the gene therapy trials, and what this has meant for them?
Yeah, of course. So there is still quite a misconception, Michelle, when it comes to gene therapy. And that's not only with the families, but it's also with healthcare providers when they're referred to us. So there's a big misconception that people think gene therapy means that you don't have to have a transplant. They think that it means you don't have to have any chemotherapy. They think that it means that there's no risk of infertility. So we have had families who were referred to us with the option of moving forward with gene therapy. And then when they hear this, that there is still a risk of infertility, or that you still have to have chemotherapy, they're then not happy with the decision and they then decide not to move forward with it. So I think there are still some misconceptions around gene therapy and what it involves. And that has been difficult at times to overcome, and just to highlight it to all of the other healthcare providers as well.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Over to you, Hilda.
Thanks. Can you explain the most important nursing interventions or care for patients undergoing gene therapy, Kelly?
Yeah, of course. So gene therapy itself is a very long process. It's quite different to that of a standard transplantation, HSC. So Jinhua had said earlier that there's quite a long workup process, which is very different to that of a standard transplant. So they have to have mobilization where their stem cells are collected in advance. And because we are not collecting stem cells from a healthy donor, sometimes one mobilization isn't enough. Sometimes they can need up to 3-4 different cycles of mobilizations. And the editing of the cells itself takes 26 weeks. You could get to the end of the 26 weeks. You might find then that there isn't enough cells left after the editing process, that it hasn't passed all of the compliances. So then again, you have to start the process all over again with the mobilization. And this can be very difficult for the families, because with a standard HSCT, because it's an elective procedure, the workup time could be 3 to 6 months, and then you're admitted for the transplant. And then your transplant admission, is about 6 to 8 weeks. Your engraftment period is about 21, 25 days. And then you have the longer post-transplant care, which is about 6 months. For gene therapy, the pre-transplant phase is a lot longer. It could take 6 months. It could take you a year. Your transplant admission, the engraftment itself is longer. The medium is about 30 days, and we know this from the data that we have collected previously. But the post-transplant phase is a lot shorter. We have seen that children have been able to return to school after 3 months, or adults have been able to return to work. You don't have the risk of GvHD. You don't have the high risk of viral reactivations, because again, it's your own cells that we are giving back to you. So in that sense, the post-transplant phase can be less complicated. You still, do have the complications during that immediate transplant itself. But unlike a HSCT transplant, there are hopefully less complications post. So it's just identifying this and highlighting this to the nursing staff and to the families, so that they are aware, and keeping those open communications with them during this very long process, so that they know that you are always there if they have any questions. Because of course, if the mobilization doesn't go well, there is that disappointment, and there is that thinking, oh, we need to go again, and we need to do that week's admission, and we need to do all of the collections. And it is very intensive for the families. And then, of course, because they're waiting that 6 months, you don't want them to think that you have forgotten about them. So it's all just about keeping in touch with the families, being there, letting them know that you're there if they do have any questions, keeping in touch with the local hospitals as well. Just keeping those open lines of communications so that they are assured, and because of course it is a clinical trial, you want them to be assured at every step throughout that.
Thanks a lot, Kelly. That's really interesting to hear how that works and what challenges you face and also the families face. We are now moving on to the next session of this episode. That is the Quickfire Round, and where we ask both of you the same question, and we will first ask Jinhua and then Kelly to answer this quite quickly. First question is, what are hypes around gene therapy that needs to be unraveled, Jinhua?
I think, just the hypes actually is mainly I think Kelly touched on that already, is in the media, also social media, is a difference, appear to be is a promising new treatment for many diseases. It's a revolutionary, for revolutionary medicine. So for me, the downside of not downside, just the things you have to be aware, but there are many challenges within this. As the key points I'd like to say is the cost is huge, and also the manufacturer's slots, because of that personal experience, because we're lucky at Gosh, we manufacture quite a number of products, and even we have patients waiting in queue on the waiting list so we have to have a manufacturer's slots available to manufacture those gene therapy products, and the key things for access. How can we make that available to wider patients populations? So that is a very crucial, because Kelly touched based on the hemoglobinopathies, those conditions, because we treated a couple of patients beta thalassemias before went over to St Mary's, and also our trials on Fanconi's, and during those stages when patients get told you actually you're not eligible because we didn't get enough cells. This is absolutely.
Thanks. Kelly, for you, what is your hype, which should be unraveled?
Yeah, I think the hype, so there has been a lot of hype. It has been in the news a lot. It is something that everyone is talking about, especially now that thalassemia has been approved. We need to do some more work around sickle cell, because that hasn't been approved. NICE are still looking into it to see whether if gene editing is the correct thing for sickle cell patients, or if haplotransplantation offers better. So what it would encourage is for other healthcare professionals, especially physicians, to enter into the haplo trials, to look at all this data so we can gather it and see which is the best thing for our patients, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to provide. We want to be able to provide a long-term cure for our patients. Of course, the trial itself is very expensive. Even in the UK and in Europe, there is only one clinical trial at present for hemoglobinopathy patients. And in the in the US, I think there are about 2 to 3 trials. So that just shows you the vast cost of it. And when it becomes available on the NHS or to other healthcare providers, that cost is still very vast. So it's something that over time we hope will go down. But of course, we don't know. So we need to make sure that it's a viable option for everyone and open to everyone.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Back to you, Michelle, for the next question.
Thanks so much. And again, I think we might have covered some of this already in talking about kind of access, but just very quickly to summarize, Jinhua and then Kelly, what are the most critical barriers to the widespread clinical use of gene therapy outside the clinical trials and into routine practice?
Well, at the moment, I think all those therapies, we can only access them through clinical trials. I think I mentioned that already. We're fortunate because Gosha has our own manufacture facilities. So we have, because the trials is closed, for one of the particular trials at ADA SCID, it's with the absolute amazing results. So we have so many patients waiting to come to be treated rather than going for bone marrow transplant. So we have, because there's no access to it through any other ways, so we do treat patients off trial, we call it. I don't know if Kelly, they do a similar thing. So we have a special license to treat patients off trial. So those patients, yeah.
Okay, great. But you say you have patients waiting, so there's I guess an access issue there, isn't there? So
yeah, so that's the
starts
one
to work, and then we have a problem with being able to expand access to.
So that's the one product we're really working at Gosh now, try to take it forward, because it's been returned by pharmaceutical company back to us.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jinhua. And Kelly, barriers to widespread clinical use.
Yeah, again, I think it's just the cost. I think what is really important, and I think what will help in the future actually is quality of life studies. So already there's a lot of quality of life studies done for thalassemia patients, and that's how we knew that offering them a long-term cure through HSCT was a viable option and would improve their quality of life. The same again for sickle cell patients. We want to prove that transplantation or gene therapy is going to offer a cure. And I think this is something then that will prove that gene editing is needed, and it's something that needs to be available widespread to everyone.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Over to you, Hilda.
Thanks. What would you say to patients asking if gene therapy is appropriate for them? Jinhua, you first.
I think because it's at the moment we are treating patients with certain diseases. It's an only number of diseases are being treated with gene therapy. Perhaps the patients should talk to their clinicians, and we do. It's not advertised, but we do make that open on a public domain to say we have a trial open. And when we go to conferences and meetings, also say what studies are available for what conditions.
Thanks. And Kelly?
Yeah, so when patients are referred to us, Hilda, we actually discuss the option of both with them, because for some patients, so we'll say sickle cell patients with cerebrovascular disease who have moya, gene therapy would not be the correct option for them. So I think it's about educating them about what their options are, because some of them come to us and they've never had a conversation about transplantation before. They just know that they haven't got any HLA matched donors. So I think it's very important that when you're counselling the families, they can be counselling for both standard of care transplantation and also gene editing, because again, it's about empowering the families to make the correct decision for them. And the physician, of course, will gather all of the information, will take the history. The nurse as well will be part of all of this so that you can put forward to them the best options. But not everyone is eligible for gene editing, and especially, of course, as part of the clinical trials, the exclusion criteria is extremely strict, just because of the small numbers that they are doing. And when it's available to everyone, widely spread, some people might want to go for more of that novel therapy, but it might not be what's actually best for them. So I think, again, and I know I keep repeating this, but it is all about educating and empowering your families so that they can make the correct decision for them. Because that's what we're there for as healthcare professionals. We are there to advocate for our families and to look after them and to give them, that best possibility that is there for them. Yeah.
Thank you. Such an important message.
Yeah.
Back to you, Michelle, for the last question.
Right. Very finally, what very small nugget of information, Jinhua, would you offer to health professionals about gene therapy?
I'm going to borrow what Kelly's emphasized, because they never get a chance to say, is the education in, for healthcare professionals, perhaps, just awareness of what the options, what's out there, what's available for their patients. Again, because it really is not available to everybody, and extremely restrict exclusion of criteria is but I think my situation is slightly different. When we get patients referred, is that there's lots of gone through several steps already from the local team to the tertiary center, to the gene therapy center there, where they can be treated. I think just need to be aware of what's out there, what the options are for patients.
Thank you. Thank you. And Kelly, what nugget of information about gene therapy should all health professionals be aware of from your perspective?
I would say to utilize your MDT. So to have a successful transplant, to have successful gene therapy, you need to utilize all aspects of your MDT, whether it be from the psychologist, straight at the very beginning, they should be involved. When it comes to collecting your stem cells, you need to have very good apheresis nurses who are able to get efficient but good stem cell collections. You need to educate your nurses on the ward about mobilizations. I came from a centre where we didn't mobilize. I had no idea about plerixafor or giving GCSF at certain times. We just gave GCSF once a day because their neutrals are low. We had no idea before going into it. So again, educating nurses, you need to do everything on time. You need to have your parents. When it comes to the transplant admission itself, then you are going to be using all of your MDT. Your nurse coordinator is going to be looking after the family from the very beginning, during the transplant, that post-transplant phase, and all of the physicians, because again, allogenic transplantations are different to autologous transplantation. So just those differences. So using the MDT, the wider MDT, the whole way through the transplant itself is key to a successful transplant and key to a successful outcome for the family and the patient themselves. And of course, then just banishing those myths from the very beginning, like going back to about the fertility and the chemotherapy and making it very clear to all healthcare professionals that you still have to go through a transplant even if you are having gene therapy. There still is those risks involved.
Thank you so very much. I want to take this opportunity just to thank you both for your time on the pod and look forward to hearing more about gene therapy. Thank you very much.
So now we are at the end of this podcast, and we really appreciate all these experiences from Jinhua and Kelly. Gene therapy is still evolving, but it's already showing its potential to transform the treatment of life-altering conditions. And we would like to take the opportunity to thank our guest, but also the technical team and my wonderful co-host, Michelle. And we hope to see you next podcast. And thank you all, listeners.